You're listening to the winning literary show, Off the Shelf Books Talk Radio, live with host Denise Turney, author of the books Long Walk Up, Portia, Love Pour Over Me, Spiral, Love Has Many Faces, and Rosetta's Great Hope. Turn up your dial and get ready for a blast of feature author interviews, 411 on book festivals, writing conferences, and so much more. Ready? Let's go.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Off the Shelf. For our loyal listeners, I can't thank you enough. This is 16 years. I mean, I didn't even think I would ever do this. And so 16 years into our loyal listeners who've been with us the whole journey when we started over at the Rainbow Soul, that smooth jazz with our talk show over there, now to Blog Talk Radio. I thank you so much. And if this is your first time, you're just looking for something to do, and you scrolled over here, I want to thank you for tuning in to Off the Shelf and let you know that, yes, you are listening to the winning book podcast, Off the Shelf Books. And welcome to, it's already, I'm seeing commercials on TV for the holidays, and they're saying the holiday gift spending going to be up by like 3% this year. It's supposed to be up considerably, which is for retailers good news, and the economy that's good news, and people who get paid a salary to work in retail, that's good news. So that's a good thing. But what I'm shocked about, though, is they said if you want to do something, you better do it now. It's October the 19th. I feel like October just started. These weeks are going like a blaze. Before we go any further, I want to leave this quote with you. You know, I start the show with a quote. And this is from Nito Quaben. Your present circumstances don't determine where you can go. They merely determine where you start. That's if you're born in a bad situation, you're in a bad situation now, you made a bad decision. Your present circumstances don't determine where you can go. They merely determine where you start. And that, again, is Nito Quaben. And that's a beautiful, beautiful quote, something to really remember. And that's something for me to remember as well. So before we go into introducing you today's awesome guest, I just want to ask you, do you love a good mystery? A good mystery. And this is a book I'm promoting again. And this mystery is in the 1940s. It has some real life. I actually had a reader tell me, oh, you wrote about this family in Memphis. No, I said I didn't. And because I didn't even know who the family was in Memphis. It's amazing how a novel can mirror something in real life. But I didn't know about that circumstance. But this mystery does have some real life events from like the 1940s and things that are timeless. There is a little bit of paranormal mystery in here, because this one girl has she's a seer. She has this ability to know things that other people probably wouldn't know. It's a murder mystery. If you like a good mystery, and it's family, there's small town, religion, it's just, but these two families really are what the story centers around. If you like a good mystery, and I mean something that'll keep you turning the pages, I encourage you to get a copy of Spiral. It's an ebook, paperback, and hardback. And you can get it at booksellers, online, offline, anywhere, because it's carried by the largest book distributors in the world. Spiral by Denise Turney. And let me know if you figure out the ending before you reach the last page, and no skipping pages, because it has a shocking ending. Spiral by Denise Turney. And now let us go and meet our very special off-the-shelf guest. And this morning's guest is Jordan Hampton. And Jordan is a teacher with a master's degree in English, so that's just a perfect matching for writing books. He is also a science fiction and fantasy writer. And as shared at his website, he aims to create stories that are just as entertaining as they are powerful. In addition to writing and teaching, Jordan is a martial artist and preacher. And books he has authored include Ignition 2084 and Eruption 2085. And those might seem a long way away, but they probably are not as long off as we would think. You can check Jordan out online at authorjordanhampton.com, AUTHOR JordanHampton.com. ArthurJordanHampton.com. And we want to welcome Jordan to Off the Shelf Books this morning. Welcome, 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 Jordan.
Thank you so much for having me. I know that you're a busy woman, and this is very exciting to me. Let me just say, you are fantastic already.
Oh, well, we're so happy to have you here with us on the show, and we've had so many wonderful guests over the years, and so you're added to that list of amazing guests. So I want to just let you know the first few questions that I will ask you, I ask every guest. When I first started on Rainbow Soul, I just went right into the questions, and I got all these emails from listeners saying, don't do that. Give us some backstory on a guest first. So the first few questions I ask every guest who comes on the show, just to give a little backstory. So to kick it off, can you tell Off the Shelf listeners, Jordan, where you grew up and what life was like for you growing up?
So I'm a military brat. I started off in Memphis, Tennessee, and then Darmstadt, Germany. I lived there for about 7.5 years, so most of my childhood was spent, around other cultures, learning different walks of life, expanding my horizons from a personal standpoint. And then El Paso, Texas after that, and then Phoenix, Arizona for college. Then it was a little bit after my dad passed away, so I moved back in with my mom just to, kind of keep an eye on her, make sure she's still able to, go to work and not have to worry too much about my sister. So after that, we lived in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and then I ended up moving back out to Phoenix, the Phoenix area, to teach at Canyon View High School, and I recently just left that job to work at Grand Canyon University as both a university counselor and an adjunct professor.
Wow. Oh, my goodness, you have quite the history. Oh, good for you, and I'm sure that impacts your writing. You have such a broad range of life experiences, because we bring what's in us into our stories. Now, when you were a kid, your parent was in the military, so you traveled. But when you were a kid, what did you dream of becoming when you grew up?
Weirdly enough, a writer.
Interesting. Very few writers on here say that. That is so rare. We've had so many authors on New York Times, people who work in movies, etc. They almost never. It's always something else. That is really rare. You're probably one of maybe 5 or 6 that we've had over 16 years who've said that. Awesome. Why did you decide to become a teacher? What drew you to that profession?
Well, I was I had just been given a general discharge from the Air Force. It was early on. I had asthma as a kid, and it caught up with me. And so for my own safety, I was removed from service. But in between jobs, I got a tip from one of my friends from church who said that substitute teaching is a good way to pass the time, interact with other people, and you end up learning so much from the kids that it kind of makes you want to stay. And so while I was trying my hand at subbing, I ended up falling in love with the teaching profession. Of course, it's pre-pandemic. Things are a little different now. But I ended up falling in love with the profession, and I decided to go back to school for English for secondary education. And so for the last 8 years, I've been working as an English teacher until recently. Well, technically yes, but technically no, because even at the college level, I'm still in the English department.
Wow. You know what? My sister's a teacher. And when we were kids, she always seemed like she had a lot of other kids. And we all had friends, kids around her, but that was just something she sort of, and she teaches special ed now. She's taught different levels of Head Start. She's taught different classes of different types of classes. And so, but she seems to enjoy doing her special ed. She always thinks about her students. When she will come on vacation, and I'm curious if you're like this, and I wonder if people know just how much teachers give. Some teachers, like every profession, some are really stellar, some are average, and some aren't so great. But wherever she goes, she stops and she's like, oh, my students would like this. She spends her own money and buy things for her students when she's on vacation. Oh, this would be good for my students. They're always on her mind. Are you like that?
Yeah, even now that I've made the switch, my kids from when I taught high school are still very much my babies. So it's funny because when I left earlier this year, they all found my author Instagram, Mr. H, the author, and they started asking me questions like I still worked there, and they check up on me just like I check up on them. Like they really, and everybody's scared of teaching high school because they're scared that the teenagers have all attitude and no common sense. But the truth of the matter is, they are 4-year-olds in bigger bodies. They just want somebody to be proud of them. They just want somebody to show them a little affection. They want, of course, they want somebody to teach them, but they want the truth of what it is that they're looking at, not the watered down, sanitized version that seems to be very popular today.
Yes. I have one more question on teaching, and then we're going to go into your books. I have to ask you this. How do you see education evolving with AI and other technologies in play?
Ooh, that's a great question. And it's funny because just this last school year, I had a couple of students try to use AI to write their essays for them. And they couldn't figure out how they got caught immediately.
Wow. Oh, boy. I
feel like the use of AI should be limited to brainstorming purposes only, just because when you ask it to write the whole paper, you're going to get a little bit of everything that's ever been written on the subject pooled together. And I'm a little ashamed to admit this, but the same sources that I used to fast track my education in high school are the same ones that appear in their AI writing. So I can tell from first glance that they cheated.
Oh, gosh. Oh, my gosh. Yes. Yeah, that is, we'll see, especially as AI advances, how it will impact all of our lives. I think at some point it's going to, our technology, our appliances, already it's in our vehicles. It's going to impact, nobody's going to go unimpacted, I don't think. So thank you for sharing that, Jordan. Now, who or what inspired your love for writing books?
Actually, that would be my 4th grade teacher, Miss Higley. It's funny because I haven't talked about her in years, but she was the first person to really challenge me to write anything, and to not just put the words on the paper, but to enjoy the words that were coming out. And so I wrote first to I wrote first to pass the assignment. After I figured out that I could actually do this, then I started writing to entertain myself. And then in 5th grade, some other kids were looking at my stuff and they were entertained just like I was. And I'm like, oh, so I could probably entertain a whole lot more people like this. And, as time passed and I got older and, I started experiencing more of what life had to offer, I also felt like the purpose of my writing should also shift from just pure entertainment. No, don't get me wrong, it's still very much entertaining, but I wanted it to convey some of the realities of my lived experience, because I don't know how much you're paying attention to the political scheme right now. But the Black lived experience is one of the highest points of erasure, and I refuse to be censored by anybody, like any good author should.
Yes, yes. Now, before we go into your stories, and thank you for sharing that, you also, and this plays a role in your stories, which is why I wanted to ask you this question. You're also a martial artist. How has practicing martial arts disciplined you as a writer?
Ooh, I've never been asked that question before. But that's interesting to think about. So with the two different martial arts that I practice capoeira, which is, I don't know if you've heard of it, but for those in the audience who might not have, it's an Afro-Brazilian martial art that was created by enslaved Angolans in Brazil, and they pooled their tribal martial arts to work around the fetters on their hands, and it specializes in kicking. When they got in trouble for looking like they were practicing martial arts, they disguised it in dance. And to this day, it's still practiced as it was in the days of old through dance. And it's funny because a lot of people, they don't realize how dangerous capoeira is. They just think it's a lot of flashy movements. But capoeira is a lot of oral tradition in the same way that a lot of African societies practice oral tradition. Hardly anything is ever written down. You get it from the elders passed down to the youths, and your responsibility to the martial art is like a responsibility to society. You now hold that history, and so it's your job to relate that history to someone else. And not just the history, but the music, the language, everything capoeira is in Brazilian Portuguese. And so that's actually kind of what taught me enough Brazilian Portuguese to get by. My other martial art is kenjutsu, Japanese-style swordsmanship outfitted for real battle. And there's a lot of things that come from that, too. There's a sense of lineage. A very strong focus on what comes out of what has gone before. There's a reverence to it. There's a focus on building strength through forward movement. You don't stagnate. You don't fall back. You don't retreat unless it results in you moving forward as a result. So with my writing, I try to encapsulate that like elements of both of them. I want the traditions that are there as they're born from people like us, minority communities that don't oftentimes get the spotlight. I want to showcase that fierce determination to accomplish goals, because that has been my entire life, and so many other people like me can relate. And I want to emphasize language in my works, because there's so much power in what is said and how it's said, and we oftentimes overlook this because of the show that's in front of us.
Oh, my goodness, love what you shared. Now, putting that together for our listeners as well, because there's that martial arts element in your writing. What inspired you to write this particular story that is Ignition 2084?
Well, the short answer is 2020.
Oh, okay.
We were on lockdown. We had shady politics, a botched handling of a global pandemic. We had what seemed to be the reemergence of race riots and race wars, constant miscommunications, intentional misunderstandings, and nobody seemed to be willing to address what we were seeing in any kind of educated facet. So I wrote a story, Ignition 2084, where America falls apart. The country as we know it no longer exists, and factions have emerged to try and either subjugate those minority communities that are unwilling to bend the knee to the old regime, or the freedom fighters who are determined to get their freedom by any means necessary.
Interesting. Okay. So can you give us just you tell us a little bit about what the story is and 2020 inspired you. Can you give us a little synopsis on it, including telling us what period is the story set? It's in 2084. Is that the year it starts? Why did you choose this year? And can you give us just a little description for somebody visually to see what the area that the story takes place in looks like? Are cars flying? Is there just total destruction? What does the environment look like? And why did you choose this time period?
Okay, well, that's actually an easy one. So I chose 2084 because it's 60-some odd years in the future. It's not terribly far away, and a lot of us who were alive in 2020 will hopefully, prayerfully, be a little elder in 2084. But I wanted it to be set in that time period because, like, this story is as much dystopian as it is a science fiction adventure novel. And good dystopian writing always jumps to the worst case scenario. So I wanted it to be somewhat close, but still not too close, so that we could see if we don't address the issues of equality, the issues of climate change, or the issues of just public health in general, where our society could lead, and that is to collapse. Every empire in the history of humankind has collapsed because of a failure to meet the needs of the public. And that's really what it boils down to. Wars exhausting funding that could have been expended on things that matter to the people that live in said society. Instead of trying to annex territory, you take care of what you already have. And so with the environment, things are kind of wild. Cities have been almost completely destroyed through years of war. In fact, a second civil war rose up after one president went rogue and dismantled the structure of everything. And in the aftermath of the Second Civil War, you have clearly drawn lines of territory and battles being fought between a variety of different people. And it's not like the First Civil War, where things were very clearly mapped out over the course of slavery. It is a little bit different because you have a lot of people from various different walks of life, various different histories that are recognizing that the actions of the government are either right or they are wrong. And that's the line that they've drawn as a means of going to battle.
Wow, you're dealing with some real important topics. And it's funny when you look at, not funny, but when you read history books, for those who do, or archaeologists when they stumble upon things, it's hard to believe that some of these civilizations that were dominant and powerful for, years, decades, that some of them don't even exist anymore. It's almost shocking. It really is. It really is almost shocking. Like, oh, my God, you don't even think it could ever happen. But it already has to so many other civilizations. Now, so tell us, like, I want to start to ask you about the characters. But in the very first, I want to say a few pages of Ignition 2084, what's happening in the very opening, and what is everyday life like in the start of the story?
Well, at the start of the story, in the prologue, we actually get to see a battle test. So the Yaiba insurrection has been pushed to the brink. They're almost completely wiped out. They're hiding in the ruins of the White House, actually, from the Scarlet Kingdom, which is basically just America revamped in the most extreme way possible. And so they've been fighting through guerrilla warfare for a long time. Their numbers have depleted, their resources are dwindling, but their head engineer comes up with Hanzo gear. Hanzo gear is named for Hattori Hanzo, who was probably the only clearly recorded shinobi in Japanese history. And to that end, they have what they're battle testing is Kyoketsu, which is like a knife or a blade at the end of a long chain that they can use as grappling hooks or they can use as actual weapons. They have repulsor boots that allow them to change direction mid-flight or jump to ridiculous heights depending on application. And they have I'm going to say it in English, well, it's a Reikiken, but it's an aura sword. And what I mean by that is there's a little thermal amplifier in the hilt that siphons off the heat energy from the user's palm, and it funnels it through the tungsten blade until it reaches just before the melting point of tungsten. So theoretically, it would be able to cut through just about anything. And so they're in the midst of a battle against their enemies, trying to use their martial arts skills, which, funnily enough, mirror some of my own. I can't do everything that they do, but I've been in enough sparring matches and unique ones at that to be able to kind of choreograph a fight scene in my head. And so they're fighting, and as they're fighting, you see their ideals kind of bubble up to the surface. And so one side calls it the White Ruins miracle because they ended up winning that fight and preserving their faction. The other side, the side of the intended oppressor, calls it the White Ruins massacre because nobody from their side is ever supposed to lose that badly. And so I really, my characters really play with the dichotomy of war. Who is the good guy? Who is the bad guy? Is there such a thing? And as you go on, the book is told through multiple different perspectives. You get to hear from people from the Yaiba insurrection and the Scarlet Kingdom. You get to see that everybody is just doing the best that they can to survive in the conditions that they're dealt.
It sounds so interesting. This is one thing I love about the off-the-shelf and I always say this to authors. This is why I think interviews are so important for authors. You get to tell so much more about your story, your characters, what inspired the story, and in just a written paragraph description. You get to go in to really where a person is like, oh, I want to read that story. Now, did I say this right? I was asking you, what is the Reikiken? Is that the sword you were talking about, and the power it has? The Reikiken?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That was. So is that the one that is it the most powerful weapon? And I would imagine that's what the fighters want. That Reikiken. The way you described it, it's like it could cut through anything. You said.
Pretty much. I mean, there are still some limitations, but one of the fun parts of writing this story and its sequel, Eruption 2085, was how much chemistry, physics, and other I had to research basically every kind of every kind of science that could possibly go into the battlefield, aerodynamics a little bit, anatomy and physiology, and so the Reikiken. I hesitate to say this in any kind of open forum, but it's decently practical in the sense that the heat that it gives off would be able to, if the field is wide enough, distort bullets that are on their way to their target. The Hanzo gear, the cloak and pants that they wear is lined with not shock resistant, but shock absorbent material that kind of dulls the effect of bullets. So theoretically, they can charge head on into battle against somebody using modern warfare. And as long as they're not being targeted by a missile, they should be fine.
Wow. Oh, my gosh. And you base that on research, you said. So I mean, nobody's invented that yet, but that is pretty impressive. Now, who are the Hanzo gear? Are they a people? First of all?
So the Hanzo gear is that's actually their battle suit for the Aiba insurrection.
Oh,
so,
okay.
The Hanzo gear is the Reikiken, the repulsor boots, the shock-resistant clothing,
okay,
and the Kyoketsu Shoge, the chains. And everybody who's read it so far has sent me an email, text message on in my DMs talking about, so where could I get this Hanzo gear? Because that sounds cool and I want it. Yeah, no.
But it doesn't really exist. You just made it up. Oh my God! And your research like that, Reikiken sounds like the military probably want to get a hold of that. Now, in Kingdom Scarlet, you say there is no clear cut between these two freedom fighters and I guess the established what's left of the government. I'm assuming there's no clear cut who's good, who's bad. There is none from what you just said. It's a little grayish for both. So
I'm sorry. Go ahead with your question.
No. So Kingdom Scarlet, is one of them? So the readers are reading this Ignition 2084. Is one of them more for good for the people? What can help people? The environment? Are they one more good that the reader could root for them more? Is that so or not so?
I believe so. I think that it's the truth of reality. Like we right now, in many ways, are still battling it out with white supremacists who believe that our communities should not get the same equal footing as them. But what I've come to understand about people like that is that they're not thinking for themselves. They don't have the capacity. They cling so hard to the indoctrination that they've been fed from a young age, and unless they have an encounter with a different thought or a different ideal, they're not going to be capable of that change. And that's a lot of what we explore in Ignition. There are some people who are on the battlefield who encounter these people regularly, and in the off chance that they have a conversation with them, they realize that these people who are fighting for their rights are not terrorists. They're just people trying to survive, same as them. And so then the question shifts from, am I doing my duty with eliminating the terrorist threat, or am I doing my civic duty of making sure that everybody can survive in a way that befits them most? And so then you have people turning against the Scarlet Kingdom who basically preaches the same extremist dogma, the same indoctrination, the same white supremacy. And you have people on the inside who are looking at that like, okay, so I've actually seen these people. I know who they are. Yes, we've come to blows, but I don't know if I agree with this anymore. And so you start to see change unfold. And it's only through a realistic perspective of the other side that change is able to happen. And I think that's, we talk so much after every tragedy that happens on American soil. We're always like, we need to unify. But nobody ever addresses the things that have caused division in the first place.
Yes. You know what? It's kind of interesting. I was watching a documentary, a show. This woman got caught up with, she started dating this guy. He was in a white supremacist group. And she got caught up, and she ended up beating up another woman in the group as well. But she beat her up because she was cheating on somebody or something. All of them were white. She beat her up, and she had to go to jail. The lady pressed charges against her, and while she was in jail, she was around a lot of black women, and she saw that they were not the way she had been taught, and now she speaks out against. But she said it was if she hadn't had that experience, her beliefs would never probably have changed. And she said they just changed so significantly because she saw for herself that what she had been taught wasn't true. And so, because she said there's a black woman, they helped her, and she just saw very different from what she had been taught. And now she totally teaches the opposite of what. So it kind of goes along with what you said, something where you see firsthand for yourself. And some people have to see it over and over to say, God, what my parents taught me and my grandparents taught me, it's not true. You see, then you start to open your eyes. You got to learn, like you said, to think for yourself. Now, what makes John Hamlin a capable leader, and is he what we would call a good man?
I think for the most part, yes. I think that with his leadership, it's very clear from the outset he does not want it. He doesn't want it at all. And I think that the best leaders have been a little apprehensive about taking on the role of leadership. It's those who crave power that we have to be very concerned with. But John is legendary amongst the Yaiba insurrection. He has been working on covert black ops missions for a long period of time, and somehow, some way, the enemy has not managed to get him yet. And it's when he's at home, though, that everything kind of changes. He reconnects with his son, who he hasn't seen in the last 2 years, and his wife, same story. He's reconnecting with his friends. He's ignoring his negligent father. He's dealing with, it's like he goes and he performs his mission, and that's simple to him because it's fight and win or gather information and retreat, one of those two. But when he's at home, you see him more in the communal aspect. You see him interacting with his close friends who are basically family, because that's what war does to people. When they're threatened with imminent subjugation and oppression, they bond together. They create bonds with people that don't necessarily look like them or think like them or act like them. And so with John, the depiction of him amid his community and showcasing like that importance of his community is key information for the reader, because when he does take on the mantle of their leader, he's not leading from the perspective of a politician or a businessman or anybody else that would get up there and lie to you. He's leading from the position of someone who truly cares about his community, about his wife and his kid, and about his friends' families as well. And so every decision that he makes, whether he wants to be in that decision-making capacity or not, he makes them with the utmost care because he doesn't want to lose anyone. And I think that, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think No, go on. Please continue. There's still a little bit of unforgiveness with John. He struggles with forgiving his father for casting him out. He struggles with forgiving the people that have hounded his community and tried to murder them all or tried to force them into the second coming of American slavery. And so when you watch him go from the beginning of Ignition to the end of Eruption, you're really seeing the reality of his struggle. How do I deal with the people who hate me for simply existing? And that's something that I feel everyone in any minority group can understand and relate to, because there are people that hate us just because we exist. No good reason, just that we're here. And I want, again, to encapsulate the truth of my existence. Wow.
Now I have to ask you, so can you because then you have the sequel, Eruption 25, which we'll get to. Can you introduce our listeners to some of, you mentioned his wife, his father, who cast him out. Can you introduce us to some of the other major and minor characters who take center stage or showcased in Ignition 2084?
That's very fun for me. There's John Hamlin, who is kind of the leader after a certain point. There's Emiko Ishikawa, his predecessor, kind but firm. She can get on the battlefield with the best of them herself. One of the things that I'm proudest of is that the women in this book are no joke.
Why did she step down? Why was she replaced by John? What happened to her?
I can't tell you.
Oh, okay.
I would love to, but I can't.
Okay.
There's Bill Jarrett, there's Brian Picchio, both close friends of John. One stays, one betrays. I'm not going to tell you who's who, because that would ruin the fun. But there's the King Shane of the Scarlet Kingdom. He is ruthless and cold-hearted, and he wants full control of the entire American continent, and he doesn't care who he has to sacrifice to get there.
Wow.
Whether or not he's successful or even comes close, you'll have to read and find out. One of my favorite pairs is actually a Scarlet Kingdom duo, and it's Serenity and James.
Okay.
So Serenity leads an all-female death squad in the Scarlet Kingdom's army. And I made it a point to put in the inherent sexism of the Scarlet Kingdom because, one of the issues that we deal with in the United States is rampant sexism, the demeaning of women of every ethnicity in terms of what they can and cannot do with their bodies and what they can and cannot say and actions that they can and cannot take. And so she is different from most of the women in that society because she would not be told no by any man. And so that by itself is a reason to cheer her on because she is in an oppressive environment that disagrees with the fact that she is a woman with power, and she does not care in the slightest. In fact, she rallied other women that were just like her who would not be told no, and she managed to accomplish more through military might than most of the men in the story.
Yes.
And the fun part is she's having an affair with the prince, and they're not even allowed to talk to each other.
You got stuff going on. Okay,
yep.
You got stuff going on in Nixon. Now, would you say that this Ignition 2084, that the story is character or plot driven?
I don't know how to handle this question because I have a friend who I've looped him in on another project that I'm working on, and if time permits, I'd love to talk to you about that one too. But he always makes such a clear distinction between the two, and I feel like the plot is a tool of the characters. You can't have a story without the people that make the story, and so I feel like the plot is very clear, but only after you get to know the characters that are at center stage, and it's a fair amount of them. I think there's over somewhere between 10 and 20 characters that routinely shift, and you get to see their focus, their side of things, what they're directly affected by from start to finish. And so I would say that if I had to choose a side, character-driven for sure.
Okay.
But for me, I intentionally try to write in a way that it's hard to distinguish between either because I want to give you that full immersion factor. I want you to feel like you're not just reading it, but you're a part of it.
Okay. Now introduce us to your second book, Eruption 2085. Can you give us a brief overview of the sequel, Eruption 2085?
So at the beginning, in Ignition 2084, the first, I want to say, 12 to 13 chapters are just about building up the start of the war and everything that follows that. From chapter 14 to 30 is just about being in the war and each side trying to outsmart each other. When you get to Eruption 2085, the whole cast has changed. Well, not the whole cast, but a predominant amount of the cast has changed because of what happens in the final chapter of Ignition 2084. You get to see new perspectives, hear new sides, and while the battle scenes are definitely still intense and very entertaining, and you still get the personality of the characters showing through, this is where the story ends. So you get to see which side reigns supreme in this conflict that spans 1,000 pages.
So did you always intend for this story to have a sequel? And again, from what you're saying, Eruption 2085, this is the end. There will not be another, it's not a book series, right?
No, ma'am, not this one. Now, my next project, I have 12 books scheduled.
Wow.
And we're already on book 2. But with Ignition and Eruption, I actually intended to write this as one book.
Oh.
Because I was throwing a temper tantrum in 2020, so I was of the mindset, I'm going to get in here, I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and I'm going to sit down.
Okay.
It took me 3 years to get everything out and finish the story. So I clearly did not get in there, say what I was going to say, and then sit down, because a whole new book came out of the back end of the first one. But
Ignition, people are going to get to know John and his father and his wife and the other characters in Ignition 2084.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding you. They don't appear, most of them, in Eruption, or they do? Do most of them appear?
I would say that the majority of the main cast from Ignition, the 5 to 10 core characters, they do reappear.
Okay.
But everybody else has been quietly, not so quietly, phased out. And it's supposed to, there are moments in this story that will definitely be jarring to the reader, because this is the reality of war and the reality of society. Everybody is dealing with a lot, and sometimes that whole lot that we're dealing with comes to a head, and it's not always going to be pretty. It's not always going to tie up in a nice, neat little bow. So one of the challenges to the reader is, what are you going to do with that when it happens?
Wow. Now, will readers see any romantic relationships? You already told us in the other one about the woman from I think it was the Sanctuary. She's with the prince. But will they see any other romantic relationships in Eruption 2085?
In Eruption, yes, but no. I will admit that romance does not take center stage with this story, because there's a whole lot going on. It's definitely alluded to, and in some cases you'll get a clear glimpse. I know that John's son Darius does end up in a relationship, and there are a couple of other characters who they got together at Ignition, but by the time we get to Eruption, they've broken up for reasons that I don't quite remember at this point.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of, I would love to say that it's time, because these books have been out for, let's see, Ignition came out 2 years ago, and then Eruption came out, I think, either last year or this year, and it's not time at all. It's how many different threads of the story there are. It's like, if you were, I'm curious to know, what's your favorite drama on TV from all time?
Oh, I don't know. Nothing comes to mind. Nothing's jumping up at me. Nothing's jumping at me, so I'm not sure.
Well, it's kind of like if you were to watch a Shonda Rhimes show, like How to Get Away with Murder, because that's the one that I watched. You have a cast of at least 10 people, with Viola Davis taking front and center, and then all of her law students coming up after that. So each one of them has their own thread of story, and then the characters that they're involved with have their own threads of story. And so to understand the whole, you need to understand each individual part. And when it gets to be too much, you'll know, because you can't keep track of any of it from memory anymore. That's kind of what this book is. It gives you the reality of dealing with different people. And one of my favorite things that I've ever heard is both Kirkus and Kirkus and a few other reviewers have commended me on how realistic the characters feel. It's like you're looking at people who have their own lives. And to that end, I'll say a lot of the characters in these stories are based on people I've met or have lived around or lived with.
Interesting.
So you are getting a little dose of reality with every person that you see on the page.
Yeah, and the characters drive the story. Now we're going to switch away from Ignition 2084, Eruption 2085, and I want to ask you about some other work that you do. What is the Hampton Hub, and why did you start this program?
So the Hampton Hub is a special place on my website. It's free for all who want to, but in order to get into it, you have to sign up for a mailing list. And that's just to have ease of access to everything that I'm doing. And that's where, now I've been a little inconsistent because 2024 has been a little insane. Got a new baby on the way. I actually have the baby shower later today. Thank you. And I'm starting a publishing company myself called Kabulu Global Press. And I just filed the paperwork last weekend. But what started the Hampton Hub was I started blogging. And I started blogging while I was still in the process of writing Eruption 2085. And I realized that's a little intense because I'm like hyper-focused on all that's wrong with society. And it's not exactly the most fun read. And I don't want to, I want to be an activist with my work, but I don't want to be so much of an activist that I seem like I have no other aspect of my personality. And so at the beginning of last year, I started, and this is going to sound a little crazy, but I'm used to it by now. I started building a language, and it goes to a Pan-African fantasy story that I've been working on since about August of last year. And what inspired me for that was I wanted to reconnect with my roots. I took an African ancestry test. I started doing research into different African cultures from across the continent, their languages, the language families, what derives from where, the similar phonetics, and I came out with a language called Jakato. And from there, I started building a story around it. And the first book is already done. I'm awaiting publication from my own publishing company as we speak. But in the Hampton Hub, you can actually see a rough draft of the first, I want to say, 3 chapters and the prelude of the Word of Yaneshu, Heart of the Ijaya, the first book. And I wanted to treat my audience as something a little bit different. Instead of dealing with the harsher realities of being Black in America or the harsher realities of just American society in general, I wanted to kind of address this erasure of Black culture and Black history by presenting a unified beautification of what it means to be Black and what it means to be of African descent. And so more announcements will come. But that's essentially what it is.
The Hampton Hub, you have got those wheels turning. You do so many things. I want to ask you. You said you started blogging. What writing process when you're writing a novel? You got Ignition 2084, Eruption 2085. You're working on a 12-book series now. Two of those books are now done. To get these out, because you started in 2020, and I think that's a lot to do in 4 years. What is the process you follow? Do you use sketches, outlines when you start to create a story and develop it?
Actually, so I thought about this a lot over the course of the last few years, and the thing that I think that really gets me going as far as like creative process and writing process is there's always one character, and it's like in my head, as that character comes into being, little by little, they start telling me their story. And so with Ignition, it was John more than anybody. And so we see, while we see everything from multiple perspectives, we see it mostly from his, because I can only authentically write from the place of a black male in American society. That's what I am. And while I know that good writing requires good acting, there are some things that I'm a stickler for accuracy. I don't want to use somebody else's voice if I don't share in that voice. And with The Word of Ineshu, the upcoming project, the character's name is Jacana. And in Jacado, his name means the great flow. And so he is by trade a storyteller, a wordsmith, somebody who has mastered the craft of oral tradition and entertaining oral tradition at that. And so I'm sitting here like swimming in either the conflicts of my present or the rich history of my past, and the characters are telling me how it all comes together in a perspective that is uniquely my own. So I can't say if there's a real process as much as I'm just kind of going with it, and whatever happens.
A lot of writers are that way. A lot of writers do write. Kind of, they call them pantsers. You just, as it comes, that's how you write the story. Very quickly, with just a few minutes left, can you share 3 things that have worked for you to get the word out about your books as far as book marketing goes? What have you found that works for you to get the word out about your stories?
Well, the first thing is connections, knowing people who are interested in reading, being able to interact with my circle. I know that my family, my wife's family, have been incredibly supportive, and actually my dad, who I've mentioned before, has passed away. I would always order a proof copy of my book to show people, and he would end up selling it.
Wow.
And I would love to say that has been just a him thing, but really my whole family is like, hey, look at this, I'll sell it to you for $20.
Okay.
But the second thing is doing interviews like this. I've had about 10 or 11 in the span of the last year and a half, and you know, building connections with people who have their own platform to use and then appealing to their listeners has worked pretty solidly well. But the last thing is just simply being personal. One thing that that inspired me to start Kabulu Global Press is the query letter process. You know, you get half a page, and you basically have to tell everything about your book in that half a page, and it has to sound like you, but it also has to sound very professional. And if it's not good enough for whatever reason, like the font is wrong or you spaced twice after a certain period, you know, you're not going to attract any attention. And so I found that people engage more with me when I just tell them like a normal person in a relaxed setting what the book is about. And so it's for that reason that when we do the query process at Kabulu Global Press, it's not going to be you write a letter and we'll judge from that. I want to hear you. I want my business partner and I, we want to hear the passion that you have for your story, and we want you to tell us about that story so that, one, we can honor the time that you've put into writing it and submitting it for publication, and two, so we can treat it with the same care that you would want it to be treated with.
It's similar like when you come on off the shelf or you're on another podcast and you can go in depth about your story. And although readers are going to buy a story wherever they get it online or offline based on the description on the back flap or the front or the description in the wherever it's listed for sale, they're not going to be able to hear you. So, but yeah, that is a good way to know if it's the author is really, really invested in this story, and it's inspiring the author themselves. Oh, my goodness, we are out of time, and so enjoy Jordan Hampton. He is the author of the books Ignition 2084 and Eruption 2085, which we dug into today. And he also has the Hampton Hub. He's starting his own book publishing business, which he just spoke about very briefly just now. But you can visit him online at ArthurJordanHampton.com. It's spelled just the way it sounds. Again, Arthur Jordan, JORDAN, HAMPTON, ArthurJordanHampton.com. Thank you so much, Jordan, for being here with us today. So enjoyed your interview, and your book sound just so different and engaging. And so he's a science fiction fantasy writer. If that's something you love in the history, I would encourage you to get Ignition 2084, Eruption 2085. And I want to thank our listeners, and as I always tell you, you are awesome. You are incredible. You're amazing. Go out and create a fabulous day for yourself. See you back here next Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Jordan, I'll send you a link to the show when it finishes streaming. Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.